So here's something that keeps me up at night for my clients who are already retired or recently retired or who are thinking about retiring soon. Sequence of returns risk. Have you heard of this? Sequence of returns. To me, this is the most critical risk you face in retirement. And most people haven't even heard about it, or if they have heard about it, they tend to just ignore it or disregard it altogether. Let me explain what this means, sequence of return risk. This means in plain English, it's not just about the average return that you experience over time, although that is somewhat important. Your average return over time is an important factor, but it's not the most important thing to focus on because success in retirement is more about when those returns happen, especially when you're talking about taking withdrawals in retirement. Now imagine two people both retire with $1 million. Let's say they both get the same average return over their 25-year retirement of 7% average return per year. Option A, let's say that your neighbor experiences great returns early on in retirement, 10, 15, 20% returns for the first 3 or 5 or 7 years. But then later on, at the tail end of his retirement, they experience poor returns, -20, -15, a flat year perhaps. And then you have person B, let's say that's you. You get the opposite experience. You get your terrible returns early on. You timed your retirement poorly and you retired right before a recession, and you get your negative returns, your -20, your -10, your flat years early on. And then later on, in your retirement, you start getting some good years, 10s and 15s and 20% returns, averaging the exact same annual return that your neighbor reached of 7%. Do you think you'll end up in the same place? Most people would say yes, if you get the same average return. No, that's not correct. That's wrong. Person B, that was you in this case, often runs out of money years in advance of person A, even though their average returns were identical. Well, why is that? Because person B was forced to sell stocks when they were down to fund their retirement expenses. They locked in those losses and they had to sell more shares at the lower prices to net the same amount that month to pay their bills. So when the market recovered, they owned fewer shares to recover with. So they never recover fully. I call that a snowball effect, but it's like selling your house in a down market because you need the cash. You miss the recovery if you don't own the assets. So this is actually the exact opposite of dollar cost averaging, which is what you do while you're investing. If you're putting money into, let's say, a 401k every week or every 2 weeks on your payday, and you're putting the same amount in every month, you're buying more shares when the market is down and fewer shares when the market is up. You're driving your average share cost down. That is a fantastic way to go about building wealth, dollar cost averaging. Sequence of returns is dollar cost averaging in reverse. It's the same concept, but rather than putting money in the market every couple of weeks, you're taking money out, and you're taking out more shares when the market's low and fewer when the market's high, and that turns into a snowball effect. That's what you have to watch out for. This is where diversification becomes your most important safety net. And when you're in retirement, the game of investing is completely different than it is when you're in your growth stage. Because of that reverse effect, dollar cost averaging versus sequence of returns risk. If you're retired and the stock market tanks 20% in your first year of retirement, while you're withdrawing 4 or 5% out of your portfolio to pay your bills, a portfolio that is mainly in stocks will be devastated. But if you have bonds, dividend-paying stocks, cash, maybe some REITs or other alternatives, you have some other sources to tap into while stocks are recovering. That's really important.